Okay, so today we'll be talking about the first part of Unit 5, which, as you can see up at the top, is in Topic 4 of the textbook, covering market structures. Basically, if we think about what we've learned so far, scarcity is what's driving us to make choices on how to use our resources to make goods and services to meet our needs and wants, and then we just got through measuring supply and demand and the forces in the marketplace. And so what we're going to now talk about is how do we organize those exchanges. A market is just a place of exchange. And so there's going to be basically four types of market structures. The first is called pure or perfect competition. This is where prices are determined purely by the market, so it takes what we just learned with supply and demand. And this is exactly what we want. We want so many companies making products and so many consumers buying products that not one producer or one consumer actually controls the market price. It's purely being market driven. And these are the four conditions. You have many firms, a variety of goods. You do not have any variety. So you would see the exact same product. So we'd say identical products. No barriers to entry, and no one has control over price. And the other one that would be part of this would be called easy market entry and exit, meaning there's nothing stopping a company from joining in on the market to sell their products, and if they want to stop selling their products, they can. And same with consumers. Nothing's preventing them from joining the market to buy products, and nothing is stopping them from stopping to buy products. So this is a purely competitive market. Now, if you introduce anything called a barrier to entry, it leads to imperfect competition. And so the two main barriers to entry will be what we call startup costs. So any costs associated with starting the business. A lemonade stand has pretty low startup costs, so you'll see more competition, and it's closer to being perfect, but it is slightly imperfect. If you were going to start an oil company, which has many more startup costs, you would see it further away from pure competition, and it would be extremely imperfect, which is why you can study in history about monopolies like Standard Oil. Now, technology is another one as well, and pay close attention to that, because anytime you have more advanced technology where it takes more training, more money to buy the equipment and things, that will make the market more imperfect. If the technology is not extremely prohibitive, then you'll see more competition, but still imperfect. And so, we want to get back to that purely competitive market that are efficient. Think about the production possibility curve and how we try to get onto that frontier line, using 100% of our resources, because we're not trying to waste anything of our land, labor, capital, and those sorts of things. So in a purely competitive market, prices correctly represent the opportunity cost of each product. Think about the things you buy in a perfectly competitive market. Sugar, it doesn't matter who makes it. White sugar is white sugar. Brown sugar is brown sugar. They compete against the other companies, and what you're buying is the exact same product. There's really no fundamental difference. Corn, talking about fresh produce. Apples, if you're talking about the same type of apple compared to the same type of apple. They're the exact same, so name brand doesn't matter. So when you see the prices, usually these are products that are, within a few cents of each other and usually relatively cheap. You can see kind of what happens under pure competition here. So look at that. Now, the imperfect competitive markets are going to be starting off with monopoly, and that's the most extreme imperfect market, because there's only one firm. You don't have many buyers and sellers. They don't have a variety of goods because there's only one company producing, so it's whatever they produce. The barriers to entry, we say complete barrier, meaning you can't get in. If there's already a firm that is competing in this market, they're only competing with themselves because it's a monopoly. No other firm is really going to be able to break into that marketplace. And they have complete control over price. Know the term economies of scale and why this can lead to a monopoly. Now, there are some types of monopolies, and some of these are ones we would encourage. For instance, your water company is what we consider a natural monopoly. It just works best when one firm supplies the product. If you had 15 different water companies to service, let's say, just the west part of Houston. You'd have to run pipes for all the companies, have reservoirs for all the companies, using up valuable land that we could use for other things. So it's just better sometimes. A subway system in a city, for instance, you wouldn't want multiple companies trying to have their own tunnels and things to compete for trains. So those are examples there. You have what's called government monopolies. One's called a technological monopoly. A patent is where you can apply with the government for a certain design, for instance, and it will protect your design so you can't have competition, usually up to 20 years. So it allows someone who's trying to develop something from being free from competitive nature of the marketplace that might crush them, before they even get out of the gate. So, we sometimes protect that for a time. Franchises and licenses could create monopolies, especially if you can't afford it, like broadcast licenses for radio or television are pretty expensive. And then you have what's called industrial organizations, things like the NFL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer. They basically are monopolies because they have the right to decide on their own competition. And if you think about it, these are sports leagues that only play the teams that are within their league. So they're always benefiting. They're not really competing against another group. It's just teams within the same group competing against each other. Now, if you have what we call market power, the ability to control your price, then you can do what's called price discrimination. The assumption being that different customers are willing to pay different prices. And so if a monopolist sets his price too high and only some people buy it, they're losing out some business. It's not like they're having to compete with other businesses, but they do want to make sure that the most people as possible are buying their products. So they might choose price discrimination. I know we are trained to think of discrimination as a bad thing, and then certainly historically that is true. But when we talk about it here, what I want you to think about as discrimination is discriminating choices. Kind of like we were talking about with opportunity cost. You discriminate when you make a choice. You choose one restaurant over another, for instance. Well, here what they're doing is they are choosing to divide people into groups and give different prices. For instance, senior citizens might not be able to go out to eat all the time. So certain restaurants offer a senior discount, and that's a price they only give to that group, trying to get their business, because otherwise this group of people might not frequent their restaurant. So they might do that. They might do a student discount. If you've ever seen coupons inside a cereal box, it's a form of price discrimination, because the only people that get to save $1 on the next box of cereal, let's say, would be the people that bought a previous box. So everyone else would have to pay full price, but the next time you buy, you would have that coupon. So you're being discriminated for in that instance. Now, to be able to practice this, and it's not just monopolies who can do it, you'll see this in the other two that we're going to talk about, but to do it you have to have significant market power, you have to have some control over price, you have to be able to divide people into distinct groups, and the products are usually things that you can't really resell. Cereal, things you eat and consume, kids stay free at a hotel. Well, once you've stayed at the hotel, you can't resell the stay, so you're not going to see it on things like Xbox or PlayStation 4. That kind of thing. So let's go the other two. The one that has the second least amount of competition is oligopoly, the one at the bottom here. This is when you have a few large profitable firms. Usually it's 3 or 4 firms, and they're controlling about 70 to 80% of the output of the market. So think about, for instance, breakfast cereal, since we just talked about that. There's 3 main companies. You have Post, Kellogg's, General Mills. And if you think about all the types of cereal you like, name your favorite, they usually are made by those 3 companies, at least 70 to 80% of them. Now you have a bunch of other companies that compete for the 20 to 30% that's left over, but you really have these 3 or 4 giant firms that are pretty much controlling everything, so they can kind of act like a monopoly. And it's illegal for them to do so, but the government will then try to pass laws that we'll talk about to stop them from colluding, and working together to set production levels or price. Okay, so that's an oligopoly. And then when we talk about monopolistic competition, this is the one that's closest to pure competition. but they don't have identical products like pure competition. They have similar products, like all the companies that make corn chips for salsa and queso and things. They're slightly different, but they're all corn chips, right? But they can do things like that we call differentiation. For instance, the brand Scoops. The fact that they made theirs different, it looks like a bowl, they can charge a little bit more because of that difference. So they try to find little ways that even though they're similar, they can't, they can charge more because of the unique design, but they can't go crazy and act like a monopoly, because then no one would buy their product, because there are substitute goods available. So they have to be kind of careful on that. But it's a monopoly in the sense that they have a monopoly on their design. It's unique to them and what they do. But the competitive part, the competition, is that there are so many similar products that they do have to compete, generally speaking. Okay. So, like I said, the government will try to pass what we call antitrust laws to keep companies from working together, colluding, forming a trust, or even, in extreme case, a cartel, which would be more of a formal organization that are outlawed here. The biggest cartel, though, we still do business with every day as a nation, which is OPEC, with the oil producing, exporting countries. But the government's going to look at this. They're going to try to keep things as fair and balanced for consumers as possible. And so they may regulate an industry, putting lots of rules and things that businesses must follow to keep things more on a level playing field. After some time, they might deregulate, like they did here in Houston with the electric companies. There used to be just one. Now you can decide which electric company you want to use, but in that decision, know that there's only really one company, CenterPoint, that still lays down the electrical lines and things. But there are many, many companies now that can use those lines, and you can contract to get your electrics, for instance, and that's a result of deregulation. So if you were to see a timeline like this, based on competition, if there's many competitors on the left side there, pure competition's the one that has the most competitors, followed by monopolistic competition, and then moving to the right, then oligopoly, and then monopoly with just one themselves. So definitely know this slide. These usually tend to pop up on tests. All right, thank you.